The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Evelyn Carter stood in the center of her bedroom, barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, clutching a faded flannel shirt to her chest, like it might still hold the warmth of someone who loved her. Outside, thunder cracked like a whip across the sky, but inside, the silence was louder. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step might shatter something already broken. Her hands trembled as she folded a sweater, then paused, staring at the sleeve where a small tear had been neatly mended with blue thread. She remembered stitching it late one night, while Daniel, just 8 years old, slept with a fever in the next room. She'd sewn by flashlight so the noise wouldn't wake him. Now, that same boy, now a man in a tailored suit, stood in her doorway with his sister, arms crossed, eyes avoiding hers. "Mom," Lisa had said, voice tight, rehearsed, "it's just not practical anymore." Daniel didn't even look at the photos on the wall, the ones of Evelyn holding newborn Lisa in the hospital, or teaching Daniel to ride a bike, or smiling beside them at graduation, her eyes tired but proud. He adjusted his cufflinks and said, "We found a lovely senior community, fully staffed. You'll be comfortable." Comfortable. The word echoed in her skull as she zipped the suitcase shut. Not loved, not needed, just comfortable, like a piece of furniture they no longer had space for. She glanced at the locked wooden box tucked beneath her bed, the one she hadn't opened in 20 years, the one that held more than money. It held proof. Proof of every sacrifice, every silent prayer, every time she chose their future over her own breath. But she didn't mention it. She simply picked up her suitcase, walked past them without a word, and stepped out into the storm. Rain soaked through her thin cardigan within seconds. She didn't hurry. She let it wash over her, cold, sharp, honest. Behind her, the front door clicked shut. Not a slam, not a goodbye. Just a click, as if erasing her. But Evelyn smiled faintly as she reached the curb, because they had no idea what she was about to do. They thought she was leaving forever. They were wrong. She was just giving them the space to realize what they'd thrown away, before she returned with a truth that would change everything. And this time, she wouldn't ask for permission to stay.
She'd make them beg her to come back.
23 years earlier, the rain had been just Alayhi Salam, relentless. Evelyn Carter sat on the edge of a rusted hospital bed, her fingers raw from scrubbing floors all night, her uniform still damp with disinfectant and sweat. In her arms, newborn Daniel slept, tiny, fragile, his breaths shallow against the hum of fluorescent lights. Her husband's empty chair beside her hadn't been touched in 3 days. By the 4th, she knew he wasn't coming back. She didn't cry, not then. Instead, she pressed her lips to Daniel's forehead and whispered, "It's just you and me now, baby, and I'll never let you down." That promise became her religion. By day, she worked double shifts at St. Mary's Hospital, first Alayhi Salam, a janitor, then Alayhi Salam, a nursing aide after studying anatomy textbooks during lunch breaks in the supply closet. By night, she cleaned office buildings downtown, her back screaming, her feet blistered in secondhand shoes. She ate 1 meal a day, usually stale bread with peanut butter, and stretched it into 2 by drinking water until her stomach stopped growling. When Daniel turned 5, he came home from school with tears in his eyes. "The other kids say my clothes smell like cleaning spray," he mumbled, hiding his face in her apron. Evelyn knelt, cupped his cheeks, and said, "Then we'll wash them twice, and you'll wear them like armor, because they were bought with love." She sold her wedding ring the next week, not for herself, but for piano lessons for Lisa, who'd shown a spark of talent at church. The pawn shop owner offered $120. She bargained him up to $150, then walked 6 miles home in the snow to save bus fare. That night, she heated soup with half a can of water so it would last 3 meals. Years passed. Daniel got into a private high school art scholarship, but the uniform alone cost $300. Evelyn took on weekend work at a laundromat, folding strangers' clothes until her hands cracked and bled. She never missed a parent-teacher conference, never skipped a recital, never failed to show up, even when she collapsed afterward from exhaustion and spent the next morning vomiting in the bathroom before her 6 a.m. shift. Lisa, at 16, wanted to go to prom. The dress cost more than Evelyn made in 2 weeks, so she sewed one herself, staying up for 3 nights straight, using fabric from an old curtain and lace salvaged from a thrift store gown. When Lisa twirled in front of the mirror, radiant, she didn't notice the dark circles under her mother's eyes, or the fact that Evelyn had pawned her own winter coat to buy the girls' corsage. College acceptances came. Daniel, pre-law at Georgetown. Lisa, graphic design at NYU. Evelyn smiled through the pride, the fear, the crushing weight of tuition letters that arrived like death sentences. She refinanced the house, twice, took out a second mortgage, worked holidays, birthdays, New Year's Eve. She missed her own sister's funeral because she was covering a coworker's shift to earn overtime. But she never complained, because every time she saw Daniel in his cap and gown, or Lisa presenting her senior portfolio, she heard that quiet voice inside. Worth it. All of it. And then, slowly, the calls grew shorter, the visits rarer, the I love yous replaced with, can you watch the kids this weekend? She didn't mind. She told herself that's what mothers do. They become invisible so their children can shine. But now, standing in that storm 20 years later, suitcase in hand, she wondered, had they ever really seen her at all, or had they only ever seen what she could give? The truth was, she'd given everything, and soon they would learn exactly how much that meant. The first time Daniel didn't come home for Thanksgiving, Evelyn told herself it was because of work. He was a first-year associate at a prestigious law firm in D.C. Of course he was busy. She cooked his favorite meal anyway, roasted turkey with sage stuffing, sweet potato casserole with pecans, and the cranberry sauce she liked, just hard enough to make his eyes water. She set a place for him at the table, right where he'd sat since he was 5. She ate alone. The second year, Lisa called on Christmas Eve. Mom, I'm flying to Bali with Chloe and Mark. They're doing this influencer retreat, and they invited me. It's huge for my brand. Her voice bubbled with excitement, oblivious to the silence on the other end. Evelyn had already wrapped Lisa's gift, a handmade quilt stitched from fabric scraps of her childhood dresses, each square a memory, ballet recitals, school plays, summer camp. She placed it under the tree anyway. By the 3rd year, holidays became transactions. Can you watch the kids while we go to Aspen? Sure, sweetheart. How long can you keep them? As long as you need. Evelyn's house became a pit stop, a place to drop off children, pick up forgotten chargers, or raid the freezer for her famous lasagna. They never stayed for dinner unless it was convenient, never asked how she was, only what she could do. But Evelyn never stopped showing up. When Daniel's son Noah spiked a fever the night before his kindergarten play, Evelyn drove through a blizzard to babysit, arriving with chicken soup and a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. She sat by his bedside all night, reading until his breathing steadied. The next morning, Daniel texted, "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver." No call, no visit, just a text. When Lisa's business, a boutique skincare line, collapsed under debt, Evelyn quietly paid off her $18,000 credit card balance. She never mentioned it. When Lisa posted a photo months later, "New beginnings, so grateful for second chances," Evelyn liked the post, heart swelling with quiet joy. She attended every school concert, every soccer game, every birthday party, even when no one saved her a seat. She sat in the back, clapping the loudest, tears in her eyes as her grandchildren laughed under balloons and streamers. Once, at Noah's 7th birthday, Daniel pulled her aside. "Mom, you don't have to come to all these. We know you're tired." She smiled. "I'm never too tired for you." He nodded, already checking his phone. That night, back home, she found a note tucked in her purse. Noah's handwriting, crooked but earnest. "Grammy, you're my favorite person. Don't tell Dad." She pressed it to her chest and cried for the first time in years. But the distance kept growing. Daniel started referring to her house as the old place. Lisa redecorated her own home in minimalist white. So calming, she said, while Evelyn's living room remained cluttered with family photos, mismatched mugs, and the Afghan she'd knitted during the 2003 blackout. They stopped asking about her dreams. They didn't know she still painted, watercolors of sunsets she'd never seen, gardens she'd never walked through. They didn't know she volunteered at the community center, teaching English to immigrant mothers. They didn't know she saved every voicemail they ever left, even the ones that said, "Hey, just calling to remind you about the dentist appointment next week." To them, she was background noise, a reliable fixture, like electricity, like gravity, always there, never questioned, until the day they decided she wasn't. And that's when Evelyn realized something terrifying. They didn't miss her. They missed what she did for them. And that
That was the moment she began to plan her return, not as their servant, but as the woman they'd forgotten existed. The woman who had built their world and still held the keys to its foundation.
Daniel's new fiancée, Chloe, wore white stilettos the first time she stepped into Evelyn's house and didn't take them off. Evelyn noticed immediately. The hardwood floors had just been polished. She'd spent the morning on her knees, wiping away years of scuff marks, because Daniel had texted, "Chloe's coming over. Make it nice." Nice meant spotless. Nice meant hiding the crocheted throw pillows Lisa had made in high school. Nice meant pretending this wasn't a home filled with decades of love, but a stage set for approval. Chloe swept through the living room like a curator inspecting a museum exhibit, fingertips grazing the mantel, eyes narrowing at the family photos crammed on every shelf. "So this is where you raised them?" she asked, voice light but edged with something sharper. "Yes," Evelyn said, offering tea. Chloe declined with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "It's cozy." That word, cozy, was the first crack in the dam. Over dinner, Chloe spoke of their future, a penthouse in Tribeca, smart home systems, quarterly staff rotations. "We're streamlining everything," she said, slicing her salmon with surgical precision. "Less clutter, more clarity." Evelyn watched Daniel nod along, his hand resting on Chloe's knee like he was anchoring himself to a new world, one where sentimentality was inefficient and loyalty had an expiration date. Then came the real reason for the visit. After dessert, store-bought cheesecake because Chloe doesn't believe in processed sugar, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been talking." Evelyn's spoon still in her coffee cup. Chloe leaned forward, elbows on the table, manicured nails tapping Let's. "You've done so much for us, truly. But don't you think it's time you lived for yourself?" Evelyn blinked. "I am living for myself." "No," Chloe said gently, as if explaining to a child. "You're living here, in a house that's too big, too full. You deserve peace, simplicity." Daniel wouldn't meet her eyes. "We found a beautiful senior community, the Willows. Full medical support, social activities, chef-prepared meals. You'd have your own suite. No more stairs to climb, no more bills to worry about." Evelyn finally understood. This wasn't concern. It was eviction, wrapped in silk. She looked around the room, at the dent in the wall from when Daniel tried to ride his bike indoors at age 6, at the crayon drawing taped to the fridge that read, "I love Grammy," in wobbly letters, at the armchair where she'd nursed Lisa through mono for 3 weeks straight. And then she looked at her son, the boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms, and saw a stranger wearing his face. "I see," she said softly. Chloe smiled, relieved. "We'll handle everything. Moving van, packing, even the paperwork. You won't have to lift a finger." Evelyn stood slowly, smoothing her apron. "Thank you," she said. "That's very kind." She walked them to the door. Rain had begun again, soft and steady. Or maybe she wouldn't, because by then she'd be gone, and they'd be left with a house full of ghosts they never learned to see. But Evelyn already knew what they didn't. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying. It's leaving, so they finally notice you were there at all. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday. Gray sky, wind sharp with the promise of winter. Evelyn stood on the porch in her faded housecoat, watching 2 men in blue uniforms carry out her life in cardboard boxes. The floral armchair she'd reupholstered 3 times. The oak dining table where Daniel had carved his initials at age 10 and cried when she caught him. The bookshelf filled with dog-eared novels, each one marked with notes in the margins, her silent conversations with authors long gone. She didn't stop them. Inside, Daniel and Lisa moved through the rooms like estate appraisers, not children. "Keep this?" she asked, holding up a chipped teacup. "Toss it," Daniel said without looking. "It's not even from a brand." Evelyn said nothing. She'd already packed what mattered. The photo album with her wedding day, her husband's smile still bright before the drinking started, the quilt her mother made before she passed, and the small wooden box hidden beneath her mattress, its lock rusted but unbroken. Chloe supervised from the driveway, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to direct the movers. "That painting goes in the donate pile, and those curtains? Absolutely not staying." Evelyn watched as they stripped the house of her presence, layer by layer, memory by memory, until only bare walls and echoing floors remained. When the last box was loaded, Daniel approached her, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the gravel. "We'll visit, Mom, once you're settled." She nodded. Lisa hugged her quickly, stiffly, like she was afraid of catching something. "Call if you need anything." "I will," Evelyn lied. They got into their cars, Daniel's sleek black SUV, Lisa's pastel pink electric coupe, and drove off without looking back. The street fell silent. Evelyn turned and walked back into the empty house one last time. Her footsteps echoed in the hollow living room. She ran her fingers along the wall where Noah's height had been measured every birthday, the pencil marks now ghostly under fresh paint Chloe had insisted on. She knelt in the kitchen, pressing her palm to the floorboard where she'd once hidden $200 in cash for Lisa's prom dress, money she'd earned cleaning hotel rooms on Christmas Day. Then she went to her bedroom. From beneath the loose floorboard near the closet, she pulled out the wooden box. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, nestled among yellowed envelopes and a single pearl earring, lay a thick manila folder stamped with a law firm's logo and a brokerage statement dated just last week. Account balance, $4,217,893.42. She closed the box gently, tucked it under her arm, and walked out the front door. She didn't lock it. Let them think she left everything behind. Let them believe she was broken. Because the truth, the beautiful, devastating truth, was that Evelyn Carter hadn't just survived sacrifice, she'd weaponized it. And now, with nothing but a suitcase and a secret worth millions, she stepped onto the bus headed downtown, where a new life and a reckoning waited. The studio apartment above Sunnyside Laundromat smelled of bleach and old wood, but to Evelyn, it smelled like freedom. She had signed the lease under her maiden name, Evelyn May Whitaker, and paid 6 months in cash. The landlord, a retired postal worker named Mr. Ruiz, barely glanced at her ID. "You look like you've earned some peace," he'd said, handing her the key. Now, standing by the single window that overlooked a fire escape and a flickering neon sign, Evelyn set the wooden box on the small kitchen table. Rain tapped against the glass like a secret trying to get in. She opened it slowly. Inside, beneath a folded letter addressed, "For Daniel and Lisa, when they're ready," lay decades of silence made tangible. Bank statements, stock certificates, notarized letters, and a faded photograph of a young man in a hospital bed. Mr. Alan Reyes, 2003, St. Mary's Oncology Ward. He'd been her patient, a quiet tech entrepreneur with weeks to live. One night, feverish and lucid, he gripped her hand. "You're the only one who treats me like I'm still here," he whispered. "If you ever need help, buy shares in my company. It's called Viridian Dynamics. They'll go public next year. Promise me you'll do it." She'd promised, and with the last $800 she'd saved from double shifts, she bought 400 shares. Viridian Dynamics went public in 2005. By 2010, it was a household name. By 2020, Evelyn's modest investment had grown into a fortune she never touched. Not when Daniel needed braces, not when Lisa's car broke down, not even when the roof leaked and she spent nights bailing water with a bucket. Because she decided long ago, this money wasn't for her. It was her final gift. Her legacy. Her proof that love could grow in silence and still bloom louder than any apology. But now she saw the truth. They didn't want her legacy. They wanted her gone. So she wouldn't give them the money. Not yet. Instead, she picked up the phone, the cheap prepaid one she'd bought at the drugstore, and dialed a number she'd memorized years ago. "Hello, is this the director of the New Dawn Foundation?" A warm voice answered. "Yes, this is Marisol." Evelyn took a breath. "My name is Evelyn Whitaker. I'd like to make a donation, a large one, to support single mothers pursuing careers in healthcare." There was a pause. "How large are we talking?" $4 million, Evelyn said softly.
Give or take. Silence. Then, "Ma'am? Are you serious?"
"I've never been more serious in my life." She could hear Marisol's sharp inhale. We'd name the program after you, the Evelyn Whitaker Initiative." Evelyn smiled for the first time in weeks. "Only if you promise to tell their stories. Not mine. Theirs." She hung up, then turned to the small mirror above the sink. Her reflection was tired, deep lines around her eyes, silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, hands rough from decades of work. But her eyes burned with purpose. Because the money wasn't the twist. The twist was what came after. She reached into the box again and pulled out 2 envelopes, one cream, one ivory. Inside each, a single sheet of paper. Not a will, not a curse. Just truth. And a choice. She sealed them carefully, addressed them, and placed them in the top drawer of the nightstand. Then she walked downstairs to the laundromat, where a young woman sat hunched over a folding table, crying quietly as she sorted socks. Her jacket was too thin for the season. Her shoes were splitting at the seams. Evelyn sat beside her. "Rough day?" she asked gently. The girl looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "I just got fired. Daycare said if I miss another payment, they'll expel my son." Evelyn nodded. "What's your name?" "Jasmine." "Well, Jasmine," Evelyn said, placing a hand over hers. "How would you like to go back to school? Nursing, maybe? I know a program that covers everything. Tuition, books, even childcare." Jasmine stared at her, bewildered. "Why would you—" Evelyn smiled. "Because someone once told me that the best way to honor love is to pass it on." And as the dryers hummed around them, Evelyn began to rebuild. Not a house, not a family, but a future. One act of quiet rebellion at a time.
The deed arrived on a Tuesday, sealed in thick ivory parchment and stamped with the insignia of Holloway and Price, attorneys at law. Daniel barely glanced at it. He tossed it onto the kitchen island, still scrolling through emails on his phone. Lisa picked it up out of boredom while waiting for her matcha latte to cool. Then she froze. "Dan, what is this?" He sighed, finally looking up. "Probably just Mom's old paperwork. Told you we should have hired a shredding service." But Lisa was already unfolding it, her perfectly sculpted brows knitting together. "It's the house, the deed. But what's this clause?" Daniel snatched it from her, scanning the page. His face went slack, then pale, then furious. Upon the voluntary departure of Evelyn Carter from the premises located at 1427 Maple Ridge Drive, full ownership shall revert solely to Miss Carter. However, should her children, Daniel Robert Carter and Lisa Marie Carter, choose to reside together within said residence for a continuous period of 1 year without domestic staff, renovations, or external lodging, they may petition for joint title transfer upon completion. Lisa laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "That's insane. She can't do that." Daniel called the law firm immediately. The receptionist put him through to Mr. Holloway himself. "I'm afraid it's quite legal," the attorney said, voice calm but firm. "Your mother retained us 20 years ago to draft a conditional reconveyance agreement. It's been recorded with the county since 2006. The house is hers to control, even after she leaves." "But she left," Daniel snapped. "She walked out. We didn't force her." "Voluntary departure includes emotional coercion, Mr. Carter," Holloway replied gently. "And your mother documented every conversation." Silence. Lisa sank onto a stool. "So, we either live here for a whole year together, or we lose the house?" "Worse," Daniel muttered, rereading the fine print. "If we sell, rent, or alter the property before fulfilling the condition, the deed automatically transfers to the Evelyn Whitaker Initiative, whatever that is." They stared at each other across the marble countertop. The siblings who hadn't shared a roof since college, who argued over text message about whose turn it was to call Mom, who hadn't eaten a meal together without their kids or partners in over a decade. Now, they had no choice.
That weekend, movers returned, not to take, but to bring back. Chloe refused to step foot inside that mausoleum, alayhi salam she called it, and moved into a hotel suite downtown. Lisa's boyfriend posted an Instagram story. "Adult sibling summer? Hashtag forced reunion." By Sunday night, the house stood empty again, except for 2 adults standing in opposite corners of the living room, surrounded by suitcases, resentment, and the ghost of a woman they'd underestimated. Upstairs, in Evelyn's old bedroom, the closet door creaked open in the wind. Inside, taped to the back of a shoebox, was a small envelope labeled Week 1. Neither of them saw it yet, but soon they would. Because Evelyn hadn't just left them a house. She'd left them a path, one note at a time, back to the people they used to be, and the mother they'd forgotten how to see. The first week was silence. Daniel claimed the guest room, the one farthest from Lisa's old bedroom, while she took the master suite, muttering about better closet space. They avoided each other like tenants in a broken elevator. Polite nods, clipped good mornings, meals eaten at opposite ends of the day. Then, on the 6th night, Lisa found it. She'd been looking for an old charger in Evelyn's closet when her fingers brushed against something taped to the inside of a shoebox lid. A small envelope, cream-colored, with her name written in that familiar looping script. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly, as if it might vanish. Lisa, do you remember the night you came home crying because Sarah Miller told everyone you copied her science project? You were 10. I stayed up until 2 a.m. helping you build a new volcano out of papier-mâché and baking soda. You fell asleep on the kitchen floor. I carried you to bed and finished it myself. The next day you won first prize. You never knew I used the last of my grocery money to buy the baking soda. But I didn't care, because your smile was worth every penny. Mom. Lisa sank onto the floor, the letter trembling in her hands. Tears blurred the ink. She hadn't thought of that day in 20 years. Downstairs, Daniel heard her quiet sobs. He almost walked away, but some buried instinct, made him climb the stairs. He found her curled in the closet doorway, clutching the note like a lifeline. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, from his own pocket, he pulled out an envelope he'd found tucked inside the coffee maker that morning. Daniel, you were 7 when you broke Mr. Henderson's window with your baseball. You were so scared you hid in the garage for hours. I sat with you in the dark and said, mistakes don't make you bad. Running from them does. You walked to his house the next morning with $5 from your piggy bank and apologized. I sold my grandmother's locket the next day to pay the rest. You got a job mowing his lawn all summer to repay me. You never knew I gave the money back to him in secret. Mom. Daniel's voice cracked. She kept these? Lisa wiped her eyes. She remembered everything. That night, for the first time in years, they sat together in the living room. Not on their phones, not pretending, but just sitting.
And then Lisa whispered, "Do you think there are more?" They searched. In the piano bench, a note about Lisa's first recital, how Evelyn skipped her own birthday dinner to hear her play. Behind the spice rack, a memory of Daniel's first shave, how she'd saved the razor blade in a matchbox to remember how fast you grow. Taped under the porch swing, a list titled Reasons I'm Proud of You, 27 items long, dated over 2 decades. Each note was a thread, and together, they began to weave a tapestry of a love they'd ignored but never truly lost. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the oak tree where Evelyn used to hang Christmas lights by herself every December. Inside, the house, once hollow, began to breathe again. Because Evelyn hadn't just left notes, she'd left breadcrumbs, leading them back to her heart.
The safe was hidden where no one would think to look, beneath the loose floorboard in Evelyn's old bedroom, the same one she'd used to stash emergency cash for Lisa's prom. Daniel found it by accident. He'd been trying to fix a squeak in the floor when his screwdriver slipped through a gap. Instead of wood, it hit something solid, metal. He pried up the board with shaking hands, heart pounding like he was 10 years old again, sneaking cookies after bedtime. Inside, nestled in dust and time, sat a small black safe. No keyhole, just a digital keypad. Lisa rushed in when she heard the commotion. "What is it?" "I don't know," Daniel said, brushing off decades of grime. "But it's locked." They tried birthdays, anniversaries, their father's death date. Nothing. Frustrated, Lisa slumped against the bed. Maybe it's empty. Maybe it's just old junk. Then Daniel remembered. The night before his bar exam, he'd called Mom in a panic, convinced he'd fail. She'd stayed on the phone with him until 3 a.m., reciting scripture, telling stories, reminding him who he was. When he passed, he'd sent her a framed certificate. She hung it in the hallway, but not before writing something on the back. He ran downstairs, pulled the frame off the wall. On the reverse, in faded ink, "My greatest success wasn't passing the bar. It was having you, Alaya, my mom, D, 2012. And below that, in her handwriting, password 08141975. Their mother's birthday. Back upstairs, Daniel typed it in. The safe clicked open. Inside, no jewels, no stacks of cash. Just documents. College fund statements, fully funded for both of them, paid in full by 2008. Medical bills from Noah's appendectomy in 2019, marked paid in full in red ink. A letter from a private investigator dated 2017. Subject located in Reno. Declined contact. Advised to respect boundaries. Their father. And a thick manila envelope labeled, "Watch this when you're ready to see me. Not just the woman who served you, but the one who loved you." Daniel opened it. A USB drive. They plugged it into the old laptop in the study, the one Evelyn used to check school grades and print coloring pages for the grandkids. A video file appeared. They pressed play. Evelyn filled the screen. She was sitting in this very house, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, wearing the blue sweater she always wore on Sundays. She looked tired, but calm, resolved.
"If you're watching this," she began, voice soft but steady, "then you've come back, not just to the house, but to each other, and maybe to me. I never wanted you to feel guilty. I wanted you to remember that love isn't measured in grand gestures, but in the quiet things, the meals made when no one says thank you, the tears wiped when no one's watching, the sacrifices made so your dreams wouldn't have to shrink. I sold my car to pay for your bar exam, Daniel. I pawned my winter coat for Lisa's prom corsage. I worked Christmas Eve for 15 years straight so you could wake up to presents under a tree I decorated alone. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because you were mine, and that was enough. But now, I need you to understand something. I'm not gone. I'm just waiting for you to see me. Not Eliza, your caretaker, but Eliza, your mother. Eliza, a woman who had dreams too, who cried in the shower so you wouldn't hear, who saved every voicemail you ever sent, even the ones that said, "Hey, can you pick up milk?" This house isn't yours because you inherited it. It's yours if you choose each other, if you choose kindness, if you choose to remember that family isn't a convenience, it's a covenant. I'll be at the laundromat on 5th and Elm, room 3B. Come when you're ready, not when you need something, but when you miss me. Because I've missed you long before you asked me to leave. The screen faded to black. In the silence that followed, Lisa buried her face in her hands. Daniel stared at the floor, tears dripping onto the hardwood, the same floor their mother had scrubbed on her knees for 30 years. Neither spoke. But for the first time in decades, they both felt the same thing. Not guilt, not shame, but longing. A deep, aching longing to run to that tiny apartment above the laundromat and fall into the arms of the woman who never stopped loving them, even when they forgot how to love her back.
The rain had returned. Daniel stood under the flickering awning of the Sunnyside laundromat, collar turned up against the cold, heart hammering like he was 17 again, showing up late for curfew, terrified of her disappointment. Lisa stood beside him, arms crossed, not from anger, but from the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. They hadn't spoken much on the drive over. No plans, no scripts, just the hum of the engine and the weight of the video replaying in their minds. Now, staring at the narrow staircase tucked between the laundromat's back door and a boarded-up bakery, Daniel hesitated. What if she doesn't want to see us? Lisa swallowed hard. After everything, she'd still open the door. They climbed the stairs slowly. The third step groaned, the same way the porch did back home. Room 3B. Daniel raised his hand to knock, but the door opened before his knuckles touched wood. Evelyn stood there. Not in her housecoat, not in slippers, but in a simple navy dress, hair neatly penned back, eyes clear and steady. She didn't look surprised. She looked ready. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lisa whispered, "Mom." And just like that, the dam broke. Lisa stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Evelyn so tightly it seemed she might never let go. Daniel followed, his tall frame folding into her like a boy seeking shelter. Evelyn helped them both, her hands trembling slightly as they pressed their faces into her shoulders, the same shoulders that had carried their fears, their failures, their futures. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A kettle whistled on the stove.
2 mugs sat on the counter, as if she'd been expecting them. They sat at the tiny table, steam curling from their cups. "I saw your video," Daniel said, voice rough. I didn't know about the car, or the college funds, or you weren't supposed to know." Evelyn interrupted gently. "Love doesn't keep score." "But we should have known," Lisa said, tears spilling over. "We treated you like staff, like you were invisible." Evelyn reached across the table, placing a hand over each of theirs. Her skin was thin, veined, but strong. "You were busy becoming who you were meant to be. I didn't mind being the ground beneath your feet." "But you're more than that," Daniel said fiercely. You're our foundation." A silence settled. Not empty, but full.
Full of regret, yes, but also something new. Hope. Then Evelyn smiled. A real one. Soft and sad and shining all at once. "I'm glad you found your way back. Not to the house, to each other." Lisa looked around the modest room. "You could have lived anywhere with that money." "I chose here," Evelyn said, "because this is where people need help and where I can still give it." She nodded toward the window, where a young woman with tired eyes was folding laundry below. "Her name is Jasmine. She's going to be a nurse, because someone believed in her." Daniel understood then. This wasn't exile. This was purpose. And in that moment, he made a decision. "We're moving out of the house," he said suddenly. Lisa turned to him, startled. "No," he corrected himself. "We're staying, for the full year, together. No staff, no excuses. Just us, like you asked." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "Why?" "Because," Lisa said, squeezing her mother's hand, "we finally understand what you were trying to teach us." Evelyn didn't ask what that was. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the greatest lesson isn't spoken, it's lived. And now, for the first time in years, her children were ready to live it with her. The first month back in the house was chaos. Daniel's suits clashed with Lisa's pastel yoga mats in the hallway. She left smoothie bowls on the counter. He left legal briefs scattered across the dining table, the same one Evelyn had polished every Sunday for 30 years. They argued over thermostat settings, grocery lists, whose turn it was to take out the trash. Old resentments flared like embers. You always got more attention. You never had to work as hard. But then, slowly, something shifted. It started with the laundry. Lisa found Daniel standing in front of the washing machine, holding a shrunken cashmere sweater, looking utterly lost. "I didn't know you had to hand wash this," he muttered. She rolled her eyes, but showed him how. Then came dinner. One night, Daniel came home late from a pro bono case, a single mother facing eviction, and found the kitchen dark. He opened the fridge, expecting leftovers. Instead, he found a note taped to a covered dish. "Eat. You'll need your strength to fight for people like her." It was Lisa's handwriting. He ate every bite. Weeks passed. They began leaving notes for each other, on the mirror, in coat pockets, tucked into coffee mugs. Not demands, not complaints, just care. "Your favorite soup's in the freezer. Don't forget your allergy meds, they're by the sink. Noah drew this for you. I put it on your pillow." And then, one rainy Saturday, they found the next envelope. This one was hidden inside the old recipe box, taped beneath the card for Grammy's famous apple pie. "My dearest Daniel and Lisa, do you remember the winter the power went out for 3 days? You were 12 and 9. We huddled under blankets in the living room, eating peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight. You told ghost stories, Lisa cried, Daniel held her hand until she fell asleep. That night I thought, this is enough. Not the house, not the money, just us. You don't need a mansion to be a family. You just need to show up. For each other. Mom." They sat at the kitchen table long after the rain stopped, reading it over and over. Then Lisa said quietly, "We used to be close, didn't we?" Daniel nodded. "Before we got so busy being successful, we were just brother and sister." The next day, they cleaned out the garage together, something neither had done since high school. Dust flew, boxes toppled, and beneath an old tarp, they found their childhood bikes, rusted but intact.
Without a word, they spent the afternoon oiling chains, patching tires, adjusting seats. At sunset, they rode down Maple Ridge Drive, side by side, just like they used to. Neighbors waved, kids pointed and laughed. And for the first time in years, they didn't care what anyone thought. Because they weren't performing, they were remembering. Remembering that before they were influencers or attorneys, before they had followers or clients, they were just two kids who shared a bedroom wall, whispered secrets through the vents, and believed their mother's love was Alaya Salam endless, Alaya Salam the sky. Now, they were beginning to believe it again, not because she demanded it, but because she'd left them a map, written in memories, sealed in silence, and finally, they were learning to read it.
The first volunteer shift at the Evelyn Whitaker Initiative was supposed to be simple. Sort donated scrubs, organize textbooks, maybe greet a few applicants. But when Daniel walked into the community center, a converted church basement with peeling paint and mismatched chairs, he froze. A young woman stood at the front desk, filling out forms with trembling hands. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her coat too thin for the November chill, but her eyes burned with determination. She looked up as he approached. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm applying for the nursing scholarship." Something about her voice, steady despite the fear beneath it, reminded him of someone. Then he saw it. Tucked into the pocket of her worn backpack, a small handmade quilt square. Blue fabric, white stitching, a tiny embroidered star in the corner. His breath caught. He knew that pattern. Evelyn had made dozens of them over the years, each one stitched during night shifts, on bus rides, in hospital waiting rooms. She'd always said, "One day I'll make a whole quilt for someone who needs warmth more than I do." This girl had one. "Where did you get that?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice even. She touched it gently. "My mom gave it to me, said a kind woman at the laundromat made it for her when she was going through chemo, told her to pass it on when she found hope again." Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, handed her a clipboard, and walked to the back room, where Lisa was already unpacking boxes of stethoscopes donated by a local clinic. "She has one of Mom's quilt squares," he said quietly. Lisa looked up, eyes widening. Then she smiled, a real soft smile. Of course she does. That afternoon, they didn't just sort supplies. They stayed. Daniel sat with applicants, reviewing personal statements, helping them articulate dreams they'd been told were too big for people like them. Lisa organized a closet of professional clothing, blazers, slacks, sensible shoes, so no student would walk into an interview feeling less than. And Evelyn? She moved among them like a quiet current, offering tea, listening more than speaking, placing a hand on a shoulder when words weren't enough. At one point, Daniel watched her kneel beside a teenage boy, struggling to fill out a financial aid form. His mother worked 3 jobs. He hadn't eaten since breakfast. Evelyn didn't offer money. She offered presence. "You're not alone," she said, and the boy nodded, tears welling, but not from shame, from relief. Later, the sun dipped below the rooftops. Lisa found Daniel standing by the donation bin, holding a stack of thank you letters from past recipients. "I used to think success was winning cases," he said, voice low. "Now I think it's this, being here." Lisa leaned her head on his shoulder. Mom didn't just build a program, she built a ripple. And they were finally part of it. Not beneficiaries, but carriers. Because the greatest legacy wasn't the money she gave away, it was the love she taught them to give in return. Evelyn's 69th birthday arrived on a crisp December morning, the kind where frost clings to window panes and the world feels hushed, as if holding its breath. She didn't expect anything. Birthdays had been quiet for years. Maybe a call, a text, a store-bought card left on the kitchen counter. She'd long since stopped hoping for more. But this year, the doorbell rang at exactly 6:03 a.m., the time she used to wake up for her first hospital shift. She opened the door to find Daniel and Lisa standing on the porch, bundled in scarves and old winter coats, their cheeks pink from the cold. In Daniel's arms, a covered dish. In Lisa's, a small potted evergreen. "Morning, Mom," Lisa said, eyes bright. "We brought breakfast." They stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the way they used to as children, bursting in with muddy boots and stories from school. the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and bacon as they unpacked homemade pancakes, real maple syrup, and the coffee blend Evelyn loved but never bought for herself. They set the table with mismatched plates from her cupboard, lit a single candle in a jelly jar, and played an old playlist on Lisa's phone, songs from the 90s, the ones Evelyn used to sing while cleaning on Saturday mornings. No grand speeches, no cameras, no social media captions. Just them. Halfway through breakfast, Daniel reached into his coat pocket and placed two small objects on the table. Keys. Not to a car, not to a safe. Hand-forged iron keys, worn smooth with age, tied with red ribbon. "One for you," he said, handing one to Lisa. "One for me." Lisa Tarr turns over in her palm. "What do they open?" Evelyn knew before they said it. "The house," Daniel said softly. "Not the deed, not the ownership. The heart of it. We had them made from the original front door lock, the one you installed after Dad left. Said it was the first thing you ever fixed by yourself." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "You don't have to come back," Lisa added quickly. "This isn't about the house. It's about us choosing you, every day. Not out of duty, out of love." Evelyn reached for their hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "You never lost me. You just forgot to look." And then, for the first time in 20 years, they blew out birthday candles together. Not for wishes, but for promises.
After breakfast, they walked downtown, arms linked, past storefronts strung with lights, past strangers rushing home. At the laundromat, Jasmine waved from behind the counter, Mateo grinning Elias Salam. He held up a drawing. "Happy Birthday, Grammy." Back upstairs, Evelyn stood by the window. Snow began to fall. Soft, silent, covering the city in something pure. Her children sat on the couch, flipping through an old photo album they'd found in a box. Pictures of scraped knees, birthday cakes, camping trips gone wrong. She didn't join them right away. She just watched. Because this quiet togetherness, this unguarded joy, was the gift she'd always wanted. Not gratitude, not repayment, just presence. And now, finally, they were giving it to her. Not because they had to, but because they remembered how much they loved her. And that was worth more than every sacrifice she'd ever made. 1 year to the day after Evelyn walked out into the rain, Noah, now 8 years old, stood on a step stool in his grandmother's kitchen, carefully stirring batter in a chipped blue bowl. "Like this, Grammy?" he asked, tongue poking out in concentration. "Just like that, sweetheart," Evelyn said, adjusting his apron, the one she'd embroidered with his name last spring. Downstairs, laughter floated up from the laundromat. Daniel and Lisa were helping Jasmine set up a holiday donation drive. Warm coats for nursing students, gift cards for single parents, handwritten notes tucked into every bag. The house on Maple Ridge had been sold, not to developers, but to a young couple with twins, both aspiring nurses who'd received scholarships from the Evelyn Whitaker Initiative. The closing gift? A framed photo of Evelyn with her first class of graduates, and a note: "Keep the porch light on. Someone might need to find their way home." Evelyn no longer lived there. She didn't need to, because home wasn't a place anymore. It was the way Daniel now called every Sunday just to ask how she slept. It was Lisa teaching Mateo to bake her famous apple pie, using Evelyn's recipe card stained with vanilla and thyme. It was Noah tucking a folded note into the cookie jar each night, just like Grammy used to do for his mom and uncle. Tonight, as snow fell gently over the city, they gathered in Evelyn's apartment for dinner. No fancy table, no curated aesthetic, just mismatched chairs, steaming bowls of soup, and the sound of real conversation about fears, dreams, mistakes, second chances. After dessert, Noah ran to his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. "I made this in shop class," he said, placing it in Evelyn's hands. "It's for your important things." She opened it. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay 2 keys, the ones Daniel and Lisa had given her, and a new note in Noah's careful print. "You're my hero, Grammy, not because you're rich or famous, but because you love people even when they forget to love you back." Evelyn pressed it to her heart, tears slipping free. Later, as the others washed dishes and bundled up to leave, Daniel lingered by the door. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think strength was never needing anyone." "And now?" Evelyn asked. He smiled. "Now I know it's having the courage to come back and say you're sorry." She kissed his cheek. "You don't owe me apologies, baby. Just your heart." "I'm giving you that too," he whispered. Outside, the streetlights glowed through the snow, casting long shadows that looked like arms reaching home. And Elias's Selim Evelyn stood in her doorway, watching her children walk away, not gone, but returning soon, always returning. She finally understood. Sacrifice wasn't silence, it was seed. And love, planted in secret, watered with patience, would always, always bloom when least expected. On the windowsill, the small evergreen Lisa had given her last winter now stood tall in a clay pot, its branches dusted with snow. Alive, rooted, growing, just like them.